What are the downsides of weed that people don't talk about? Been smoking every day for the past decade, and I'm recently realizing that being too introspective can be a negative thing at times. I've been thinking too much and acting too little. Not having an appetite if you're not high. You have to smoke heavily though to get to that point. It can become your only personality trait. Thank you. I'm at a college known for being notoriously heavy-handed on the weed culture. Some of my peers only goalies when they are going to get their next high, and like they are so stuck in the culture that they just become sort of boring and their personality lacks dimension. I'm not someone who thinks the practice is evil, just got to use in moderation, like anything. After about 10 years of use, my body has developed an allergy that I have never heard anyone else get. When I use THC, my sinus gets inflamed, nearly blocking the airway, forcing me to breathe through my mouth, making falling asleep very difficult. Also, the next morning the budgers I get are relentless. It is like all the stuff is coming back out my sinus. This almost always ends up with minor bleeding nose. Weed is for people that have found their way in life. It's not for people who are looking for the way. My uncle. In other words, as fun as it may seem when you're young, get your together first: education, family, career, etc. I've noticed after the initial uptick in chatter people tend to get really quiet and zoned out in their own thoughts. When I used to smoke it, I found it had a dulling effect on my personality and conversational skills after the fact too. I remember in high school, there was a girl in our group of friends who always wanted to smoke weed with us, and we never knew why, and never wanted her to, because when she got high she wouldn't say a word anymore, would be paranoid, and would just have this blank expression on her face. It was unsettling AF, because this girl was loud as hell, and was hands down the funniest one of our group. She was like an entirely different person when stoned. One thing that I never see brought up is the effect of marijuana on dreaming. Marijuana use can prevent the user from dreaming during regular sleep. When the user stops using marijuana for a while, they can experience night after night of extremely vivid dreams. I can only speak for my own experience, but I have heard this echoed by a co-worker's dad who started smoking again because he couldn't handle having acid trip dreams every night. I suspect that marijuana has some potent effect on REM sleep that will remain underdocumented until it is descheduled and more thorough research can be done. It seems like most of my response has already been said, but I want to reiterate 3 major observations, what I've noticed from my own semi-frequently weed consumption. First, demotivation. The impact from weed on motivation levels I find is in 2 parts. The first part is, when you initially consume the weed, most people fall into a habit of eating food and watching something on TV. The second part one found is the next morning, I experience a type of weed hangover the following morning. I feel more groggy and more susceptible to just loading around the following day. Second, anxiety. Things that aren't currently stressing you out may start to induce anxiety in you. While this isn't always the case, weed has the potential to worsen your mental state if you aren't careful. This impact became more pronounced when I smoked weed solo. Having other people around allowed me to be more present in the moment, whereas I was in my head when I was alone. Third, food consumption. I found for me that continued weed use led to some unhealthy eating habits. The munches are real, and for often that not you are craving food that is not considered healthy. If this becomes a more common occurrence, then your overall diet can go south quickly. I would say that as a long-term smoker that wants out, it has made me incredibly boring. If I have evening plans on the weekend but smoke anything in the day, then I'm far more prone to cancelling those nighttime plans. If I do attend those plans after smoking in the day, then I feel I'm not entirely there. Awkward silences, jokes don't land, keeping a conversation going becomes 10x harder, and I'm inevitably just waiting for an appropriate time to leave. Overall, it just kinda makes you socially awkward and super boring to be around in a social setting. Just from my experience. Frequent heavy use can affect your motivation and mood, even during periods of not being high. It is habit forming. Not technically addictive, but for some it can be habit forming in maladaptive ways. Bad for your lungs if you inhale combusted flour. Demotivation in heavy consumers. It is fine in moderation, but multiple times per day seems to suck the ambition from most people I've seen, including myself long ago. I smoked every day for about 10 years, minus about 6 months in all that as I needed to be clean for a drug test for a job. Weed starts off amazing and fun, but after becoming a habitual smoker it turns into a crux that's hard to shake. It's not that it's super addicting, it's just nothing is as fun as being high, so you want to be high all the time. It dulls feelings, but highlights feelings of existentialism which can sometimes be overbearing. I would also feel stuck in my life a lot, like it would be hard to make changes, but I would want better things for myself but it always seemed impossible to achieve. I did have problems with breathing, but I have a history of asthma and took up Take-I to compensate, which I found really enjoyable, and it helped me to slow down greatly on smoking. The one most annoying thing with being a smoker is your tolerance level goes way up, so even though you are smoking you aren't getting that high you used to get, just a mind-numbing insomnia almost. I also had a loss of appetite over time and ate less. It also made me feel comfortable with where I was in life, and I had a lack of motivation, though some days like once a month or two it could really motivate you to do something, but that would wither away quickly. Overall I would recommend it only at parties or every once in a while, but I have quit a while ago and never want to go back to being a daily smoker. Also, me being an expectant mother now has changed my feelings towards it. I don't want my kids growing up around it or around me being hype. I feel they should find that on their own if they want, and I shouldn't influence them to think it's okay. It can trigger psychosis if you're susceptible to it already. Like anything else in the world, it can be addictive. Putting anything that's not air in your lungs is bad for you. As a pretty consistent weed smoker, I don't like when people say that weed isn't addicting. They're right in saying that it's not addictive chemically like nicotine or something. You can still get addicted to not being sober. It can overcorrect for anxiety and cause more anxiety. It can dull emotions in general. This can be good or bad. When you need to be empathetic or aware, you are less likely to be. It dulls focus. You can power through it and make that focus reappear if needed, but it's an uphill battle to get to that point, and if you lose focus again you gotta rebuild it. Lowers short-term memory, which leads to less long-term memories, especially of details. It can interfere with drive in men. This has been studied and known. Not all men, but some. It can cause stomach pain in some people. It is mentally addictive and hijacks the dopamine system. This can be reversed by not smoking, but it can make pleasures less pleasurable if you smoke heavily for a long term. One of the biggest downsides I've seen as someone that doesn't smoke, but who had many friends that do, is it becomes an obsession or crutch. What I mean by this, most of my friends can't get through the day without smoking pot. They constantly need it for stress or irritation. And by doing this, it becomes an obsession. For many, including people I've dated, is all they care about doing. Going to their besties' house and smoking pot. That's literally it. I'm not saying this end up being everyone, but it is many. Both my roommates are heavy smokers, and they just think so slowly. It takes them forever to understand anything. They also forget a lot of stuff, like they'll step away from the dishes for a moment and then never finish them without prompting. The house smells like a coffin. I eat the occasional edible, but seeing how lethargic they are has convinced me to quit smoking pot entirely. Marijuana definitely needs to be studied more. Up until recently, there haven't been very many scientific studies on the effects of marijuana due to legal issues in the US. That said, there is moderate evidence that acute marijuana use can impair learning, memory, and attention, leading to a reasonable argument that it shouldn't be consumed by those under about 25, since the brain is still developing during that time. Mind-blowing anxiety and paranoia every time. Not for me, thanks. Just to clarify my position, I fully uphold anyone's right to do what they feel helps with their own body, and am not against weed. If it helps you, I'm happy for you. Wish it was the same for me. Happy New Year. If you smoke it way too often, your shorter term memory gets seriously. There was a period in my life when I smoked for 2 months straight, almost a gram a day. My memory was non-existent then. I work in consulting, so I realized it was f***ing with my job, so I had to quit. Weed is good, Just don't overdo it. It gives some people insomnia, me included. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Let us know your thoughts on this topic. See you soon.